friend, welcome to this exciting new episode of Sattology Debunking Mythology. Sat means truth in Sanskrit, and logos means a study or science, which is a Latin word. So when you combine the two for etymological corrections, I have to add additional T so that it rhymes with both Sanskrit as well as English. So the word becomes Sattology with an additional T. So it means science of truth or study of truth. Now, my next point is that mythology means study of myth or a lie or imagination, because myth is a Sanskrit word which means imaginary or fake or not real or something which has no proof. So please use Sattology for literature such as Ramayana and Mahabharat and Puran. There's some Puran you won't get the geographical proof, astronomical proof, because stories from various planetary systems may not have happened on Earth. But Mahabharata definitely happened here. Ramayana definitely happened here. So Sattology is the ideal adjective to use. It's not a noun. It is not replacing the word. Also, some people said Rushi and Rishi. Now, I'll just say it's a dialect-based pronunciation. So some people, the Ri is actually R, Ra, and Chota Iki Matra Ri. But if there is a specific word over there which slightly it becomes slightly oo sound comes out. So both are correct if you cannot say it, because I have some Chinese friends, when they chant Hale Lama, Lama, they don't say R, they say La. That is accepted because Bhagwan is Saragrahi and Bhavgrahi. So he doesn't go by your pronunciation only. If you can pronounce, it's fine. If you cannot, that's fine also. And the point is just you understand the background behind it. So without delay, let us welcome my great friend Rishi, and I also call him a Muni. Muni means a person who brings a different point of view than others, and also brings something which can be thought on. And Rishi means who does tapasya to bring out that point of view. So both are thinkers, Rishi and Muni, but titles are given accordingly to different people. Some of you ask me why I call some people as Muni and Rishi and some people do not. I said, this is just my personal choice. It's nothing to do with anyone else. And I'm not a certificate giver to anyone. So without delay, let us welcome a great friend, Rishi Muni, Nilesh Oak.
Namaskar, Aditya ji.
Namaskar.
Very happy to be here.
Same here, same. People missed you. So one thing I will say that most of your researches, people are very much impressed because you have tied the astronomical with the earthly evidences, geographical evidences. And I think that has been the best part which brings people's faith up in the Vedic literature. So what was the reason why you did that? There must be some background behind it.
Yeah, very, very good question. It was Galileo Galilei, some 500 plus years ago, who did a revolutionary work, at least in the Western European context, when he took his telescopes and pointed towards the sky. Now, of course, people will think like, the telescopes are meant to be pointed towards the sky, but I'll tell you, I take a small digression. When I was working as a regional sales manager for plastics, selling plastics in the whole Western Canada, one of my customer, I went to his house once, and his young kids, two young kids, maybe less than 8-year-old, one 8-year-old, another maybe 6-year-old. And they had an extremely sophisticated telescope. This is, I'm talking more than 20 years ago. And of course, I was always into astronomy. It was extremely sophisticated telescopes. I mean, my God, it was like a small astronomy lab, you can say. My customer was very rich, and somebody had given that very sophisticated telescope to his young son as a birthday gift. And so I was very fascinated. I was at his house, and I was talking to those his young kids, and I said, "Oh, very nice. Sometime we should, I can show you what to look at and how to focus on certain star and what to see." And just in way of asking, I said, so, well, right now, what do you see? Or when do you use them? And he just opened the window shutters, pointed this, and he said, well, very nice, beauty. This is up in Canada, like Calgary, and a beautiful backside, pointing towards the Rockies. And he said, yeah, I point here at this forest area, which was just behind his house, spotting, he said, deers, insects, squirrels, and whatnot. So I'm saying telescope can be used in different ways. But when Galileo pointed towards the sky, until then, in the Western Europe, which is what, going back, say, just 500 plus years ago, it was the assumption that we are imperfect on this terra, like on the land, like the earth, whereas out there the celestial is all perfect, smooth bodies. There are no any bumps and any ups and downs on it. Galileo, for the Western European audience at least, Galileo changed that perception. And what he said is, so I simply summarize that as this: Galileo established for us that the celestial is equal to terrestrial. And that now brings up to your question and the answer. So when my work started with astronomy, which is to say, what were the things that were observed at the time of Ramayana, at the time of Mahabharat, and maybe possibly at other times when some of our ancient Indian narratives were written. So that is good, because we cannot just easily tamper with that kind of evidence, unlike what happens on the terrestrial evidence. Having said that, once you establish something based on the celestial phenomenon, like astronomy evidence, it's also important, especially if the evidence exists, to connect that celestial with the terrestrial. And so, as you said correctly, therefore, after I completed my work on the dating of Mahabharat, 5561 BC, of Ramayana, 12,209 BC, I started getting into the terrestrial evidence. So we have talked about hydrology, geology, geophysics, geochemistry, morphodynamics of rivers, oceanography, genetics recently that we did, oceanography in the context of Dwarka. It's very important. But today, again, going back to the claim of Professor Iyengar, 1478 BC as the year of Mahabharat war. And we just did a quick introduction in the part 1. Today will be part 2. There is a lot that he has written, and it really needs to be what you call the separating the grains from the chaff is required. Okay. And actually you will find at the end of the day, it's like opening the onion, peeling the onion. So the claim is made that there are grains there to be experienced in his research claim. I'm asserting, remember, we are doing a Poorvapaksh. It's kind of mixed in a sense, like I also assert things before, because many times otherwise people confuse. When I praise a researcher for the good that they might have done, people don't know how to separate the good part I'm saying from the totally bad part they might have done. Bad in the sense of something that is not scientific, something that is not logical. Bad not in the sense of a very bad act or anything. We all can make mistakes. We all, to err is human. So we will talk about what he's claiming versus what actually you see in his claim. Okay. And how on an extremely shaky ground, I would say there is no ground on which it stands. Okay. But why this is important? I mean, why we should worry about a claim that doesn't even stand on ground? Well, it's not like we worry about it, but we should discuss it, because you can quote that yad yad acharate sreshta. In people's perception, when somebody is a great professor, somebody is a great researcher, at least as a perceived one, and they actually can be in certain areas. For example, Professor Aiyangar has done good research in seismology and even astronomy, even in the context that we are discussing, the very context of Mahabharat, very context of Ramayana, Indian astronomy. He has done great works. But we should not also fall into the authority fallacy, because somebody has done a great work here doesn't necessarily mean that everything he or she has done is accurate, precise, and whatnot. That applies to Professor Aiyangar. That also applies to me. That also applies to any researcher. I mean, Nyaya Darshana's first principle is no claim is intrinsically valid. We should never take any claim based on a authority, based on a pure Shabda Pramana, that is not even Pratyaksha Pramana. Even people say, hey, based on archaeological evidence, somebody is saying it. We have to go back and try to analyze it with the scientific acumen, with logical reasoning. So with that, let's quickly get to
I
the
just
part.
quickly add one thing,
Yeah, please go
meanwhile
ahead.
you can share the screen,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
and I'll just add one thing is just to tell the viewers that I do not endorse any, and I'm saying me and the channel doesn't endorse Audrey Trashke, Wendy Doniger, Devdutt Patnaik, Peter, there's another guy, Peter, all these people, including Romila Thapar and all these Indian historians, because they have misrepresented many places. So people were questioning me that. I said, no, I don't endorse them, and I don't recommend their books to be read also. I
Hmm.
would prefer you to read those people's work which are in tradition, or they are from Indic origin and who know, and also some Western scholars
Yeah.
who are following the Vedic path. And also, so those kind of authors only you should read. Or best is to read the original Mahabharat and Valmiki Ramayana.
Correct, correct.
That is
And within the Indic tradition, the differing views is welcome,
yes,
because that really allows us. These are like a case studies that allow us to improve our own scientific acumen and logical reasoning, like for every reader. So differing views is not something to be something that we worry about. In fact,
correct,
the one of the foundation is the freedom of thought,
correct.
and that needs to
Otherwise,
be, yeah,
we
right,
won't
and
be able
that
to
needs
do
to be
Poorvapaksh.
correct, and that needs to be connected with the Tantra Yukti, which means objective testing,
Right.
that proof is in the pudding. So somebody made a claim, that is not the end of it, then you should check for the proof. And it also should connect logically. But one more thing, like we should also look at the niti. Sometimes like it's like reading between the line.
Yes.
What is that person's motive?
Mhm.
Because many times motivations also tell us. I mean,
Yes.
Nyayadarshana is again very explicit on it. It says pravartana lakshana dosha. You can only comprehend what that person's error is, or why this person ended up in a error, based on their actions.
Right.
Okay. And so what are the three? Raga, Dvesha, and Muda. We'll not go into that. So part two, I'll go quickly through what we already summarized. So this is Professor R.N. Iyengar, from used to work at Indian Institute of Sciences. Watch the part one where you'll get the details. The specific paper that we are discussing here is his claim for the year of Mahabharat war. According to him, it occurred in 1478 BC. We will see how valid is that claim. And that was published by him in the Indian Journal of History of Science, a peer-reviewed journal. Many people get very excited about peer review. I get excited for very different reasons, but that's not the topic today. He published that in 2003. The title is Internal Consistency of Eclipses and Planetary Positions in Mahabharata. This claim, so let me go further. Now, where does this fit across this whole Poorvapaksha of Mahabharata claims that we are doing? From 400 CE, Professor Hopkins of Harvard, sitting in a chair some few years ago and just saying, well, he thinks it's 400 CE, all the way to 7300 BC of a great astronomer, if not the greatest astronomer of modern times anyways, Shankar Balakrishna Dikshit, okay, more than 125 years ago. That is, 7300 is not his claim. He was actually critiquing another claim of another great astronomer, Lele Shastri. And while critiquing it, he said, hey, if we have to correct some of the errors in what Lele Shastri was claiming, it might actually lead to 7300 BCE. That's how that 7300 BC we arrived at. Professor R.N. Iyengar's claim falls into this bracket here, which is what? Second millennium BC. And that's another important reason, because very recently we did a quick review of article written by my good friend, Dr. Konrad Elsg, in Pragyata, where he very assertively, well, I wouldn't use the word assertively because he claimed something but did not provide the evidence, but I would say very strongly he claimed that the second millennium BC is the only time, it's like a done deal, that one should look for the Mahabharata, dating of the Mahabharata war. And the reason this claim also becomes important it falls into that second millennium BC. And I am on record saying that there is not even a single piece of evidence that will put Mahabharata anytime between 2000 BC to 4000 BC. And there are two pieces of evidence. If somebody only selects those in a selective fashion, in an arbitrary fashion, without looking at the relevant evidence which will decisively falsify that claim, two pieces that the Bhishma fell down, Bhishma was on the bed of arrows for 58 days, and Bhishma passed away on the Magha Shukla Ashtami. Well, it is one of the many interpretations, but it is definitely one of the interpretations. So if somebody takes it, that's a valid thing in my mind. Only those two can, of course, lead to somewhere around, say, 1600 BC, plus minus few hundred years. We already looked at the claim of Ashok Bhatnagarji and showed how he had to ignore everything else. He was forced to ignore everything else. You're going to see that that is the same thing with Professor Iyengar's claim of 1478 BC. In fact, it gets even worse because not that there is huge difference, okay, but at least Ashok Bhatnagarji, as you go back and watch that episode, if at least selective fashion, which is not scientific and not logical, but at least using two references, at least he could show 58 days for his claim between the 10th day of the war and the day of winter solstice. That is not even the scenario in case of Professor Iyengar. But before we go there, we have to still go through what he's claiming. And some of the things he's claiming are actually very impressive in the sense I will agree with them. I'll go fast through this because we did this last time. So first we talked about the claim of Jaya. And quickly, Adityaji, I will mention something that you will also like. Just 2 days ago, in fact, it ended yesterday, there was a Indic Academy conference on Purana and Indic knowledge systems. And me and Jivan Rao presented there. And it was very good. Of course, Professor Nagaraj Paturi, he was one of the person coordinating the conference. Wonderful professor. In fact, I have co-taught a Mahabharata workshop at Chinmaya Vidyapit a couple of years ago. But the point is, he referring to Jaya, when it came to Jaya and the conference was on the Purana, he made a very good statement that you have said it before multiple times, which is that Jaya does not refer to Mahabharata. Jaya refers to the entire whole literature of the historical corpus, you can say, right? The whole Puranas, the Ramayana is parts of Jaya, and Mahabharata is a Jaya, and the Puranas are Jaya, like Bhagavad Purana and Vishnu Purana. And that is the point he emphasized. So I thought you would be very happy to hear that.
Jayam Udire.
Right. That you would be happy to hear that somebody, a great professor also mentioning it.
And that is the view of Ramanujacharya also, Madhvacharya also. It falls in the tradition also.
Correct. However, those people who do not bother to read the original literature, they will make such claim. And it's not just the claim of Jaya, but that very repetitive ad nauseum claim of original Mahabharata being 8,800 verses long. And then it kept on expanding. It's a claim without any evidence. And we have to use Hitchens' razor on Nyaya Darshana principle that unless there is evidence, we cannot prove anything. This is a very arbitrary and very irritating claim. I mean, why would you claim something that has no basis?
Now, these people, they think that they become bigger than Vyasdev.
Yeah, I mean, that's when I don't spend time in psychoanalyzing people, Adityaji, but sometimes you wonder, like, what is this motivation of this person? Why would he not read Mahabharata? Even worse, even when you point out these issues to their attention, they will just not respond.
Okay? They'll say that there's another Vyasdev.
Yeah. Anyways, but let's go fast so that I don't repeat this. So last time we did go through this. So I'm going to bring all of those. I said, other than the top one that Professor Iyengar is claiming that Jaya and poem of 8,800, that's not correct. The other points he is making are actually all good points. Okay, very good points. But I also want you to remember these points because when we get deep into the analysis of his claim and the evidence that he is claiming that he's using, you will see while he claims these things, He does not follow his own advice. Okay, so that's where we stopped last time. Now let's look at first few other assumptions he makes, and this is very good that he's stating those. Okay, he says for back calculations, results found with one or two constraints are not reliable. I really don't understand this statement, what exactly he means by it. But the way I understood for back calculations, if you are just only looking at say a couple of pieces of evidence, that may not be very reliable, or a type of evidence which doesn't have good constraints, which is to say it may recur, because in astronomy not everything repeats, but there are many things that repeat. I mean, the orbital period, so after that much orbital period, the planet will be in the same place with same nakshatra again. If that kind of constraint is there, then it may not be very reliable. I don't understand that statement, but let's take it as is. Now, this is interesting. He says claims only, he claims now that only rigorous study to explain planetary configuration and eclipses are by Sharma, written in 1986. I don't know exactly who this Sharma is. Of course, the paper that he's referring to is in the bibliography of his paper. I could not find that original documents. That's why I'm saying I don't know exactly which Sharma is referring to and what this Mr. Sharma is saying. But something why I have highlighted in the red. This is another very silly trick played by researchers. Just so pay attention. So he's now saying, out of this so many 100+ Mahabharata researchers, he's claiming that the only rigorous study that has been done of planetary configuration and eclipses is by Sharma, 1986. You will see why he's making that statement. Now, of course, to be fair to Mr. Sharma or Professor Iyengar, I have not read that paper, but we will see quickly what the conclusion is. So remember that. So to make a like assumptions or like as if like it's evident, this is not evident. This is another claim. I mean, claim of Sharma needs to be, we need to do a Poorvapaksh of that claim itself. So we cannot use the authority of somebody else and say that that is correct. But why is he using, what could be his motivation? And again, I said, I stay away from psychoanalysis, but you will see that very fast, Now that whoever that Mr. Sharma is, he says claims that if conversation between Vyasa Dhritarashtra is assumed to have, now Aditya ji, pay attention. So the conversation that we are referring to here, or that is being referred to here, it comes in the Bhishma Parva, Adhyay 1, 2, 3, which is happening essentially a day before the Mahabharat war. The context is explicit, very clear. But what Sharmaji, whoever this is claiming that if the conversation between Vyasa and Dhritarashtra is assumed to have occurred on different dates in the same year, what he means by that? The inconsistencies can be accounted for. Okay, not very clear. Different dates on the same year. Yeah, I don't think if they talk of the astronomy evidence happening around the time of the Mahabharat war, so let's say Mahabharat war year, plus minus say 1-2 years, yeah, that is possibly acceptable, because the Mahabharata evidence itself is alluding to that certain evidence was made, the observations were made over a period of 1 year. The evidence itself shows us we have no other alternative but to comprehend that the observations were made over 1 year, over 2 years. It could be plus minus 1 year, plus minus 2 years. That is understandable. But as we get deeper, eventually, you'll find that that's not what Sharmaji is saying. Okay. In
Which
fact,
Sharma is this? Which Sharma?
I don't know. We will in the part 3 or so. We will actually. I'll see if I can pull that particular document. But the bottom line is, Professor Aiyangar ji is praising whoever this Sharma is and his paper or his book or whatever it is, because that is the line of thinking Professor Aiyangar is going to adopt. Because Professor Aiyangar's claim is at 1478. So what he's saying is that based on whatever Sharmaji is saying there, that if you move certain events, move the dates of certain events, then the inconsistencies that are felt can be accounted for. And so then he says that Sharmaji arrived at 1493 BC, I have highlighted, and 2109 BC. And then he's also stating that Sharmaji does not or did not take all planetary positions into account. Okay, so he's kind of taking partial stuff from Sharmaji, that 1493 somehow Iyengarji is liking for whatever reason of his own. And then Professor Iyengar. So now you have to always ask the question in the Poorvapaksha, or doing any original research or doing research. Like somebody, Aditya ji, this is another point. Many times the conferences come, or some of my colleagues, or even otherwise, people will say, these people writing emails to me, said, sir, I also want to write on a Purana. Okay. And then I ask them, okay, so what problem you want to solve? And they're like surprised, like say, oh, problem? No problem. I just want to write on a Purana. And I said, well, then go ahead and write it. And then say, well, sir, what should I write about? I said, then you're not ready to write, right? The reason, at least in the way, at least I do research, is how does a science begin or science expands? Because you have certain problem that is not being addressed by existing theories. And to solve that problem, you propose a new theory. It could be modified theory, it could be drastically new theory. That's all welcome. One of the prediction of that new theory is a solution to the problem that is not been solved. So that is how it begins. And now you have to collect the evidence to see if the theory can be falsified. Many people don't realize that. So when they propose a theory, actually, as a researcher, your job is, you are very excited about your own theory, which is great, because it provides a solution to the problem that is not been solved. But now, actually, when you find evidence and when you try to objectively test it, in a way, it doesn't matter what you say. You might say, I'm trying to test my theory. I'm trying to prove my theory. But in reality, you are trying to falsify your theory. Just like, for example, like we are climbing on a ladder, let's say. And if you want to see if the ladder is connected properly or not, right? So what do? Once it's connected, we put it there and we may press it hard to see if it bends or if it breaks or if it falls. That pressing hard of a ladder is in a way we're testing to make sure that it doesn't break. Or when I climb, it's not going to break or fall or anything. It is like that. Before taking my theory, before taking my claim from Swarthanuman, because I may be convinced, but to be convinced from a scientific perspective, logical perspective, from the all other pramanas. Apta Praman, and so Shruti Pratyakshamitiyam Anumanam Chatushtayam, the quadrangulation. Before taking it to the people, I supposed to do this. Any researcher supposed to do it. And you will find many researchers simply don't bother to do this. Anyways, so here he is claiming that Sharmaji's work, was somewhat appreciating it. Could be because it matches with his, and that's perfectly fine. But then Professor Iyengar is claiming that he does consider that he says that he does consider all positions in the paper, which is to say Sharmaji does not consider all positions, planetary positions, but Professor Iyengar is making a claim that he does consider all positions in the paper. Some of you might think, guys, I'm taking more time here. I'm doing this for a reason. Watch this statement. Professor Iyengar is claiming that he considers all positions in the paper. Even that word consider is important. See, you just referring to a certain reference in Mahabharata, you just discussing it is not same as considering in the sense of a scientific investigation. The question to ask is, when you consider it, did that evidence matched for your theory? Did that evidence agreed with the predictions of your theory? If not, that is perfectly fine. But it is your responsibility to state that, hey, this evidence of Mahabharata does not corroborate my claim, does not agree with my theory, does not agree with my date. This particular evidence does agree with my date. You cannot take something selective, arbitrary, like that Balarama Tirtha Yatra, and say, oh yeah, here, look, I have shown it. No, that is one of the 300 plus. Also to realize that if you show Balarama Tirtha Yatra starting from Pushya and Shravana, every other evidence will go against you. This is not understood by people who don't understand scientific acumen. Anyways, so now Iyengar is claiming that he is considering all the positions in these planetary positions. Let's see what reality is. Quickly, those people who may want to see what are these positions we are talking. Okay, again, we are talking Mahabharat, so that 12,209 BC or the historic Rama is not relevant. But I would encourage all of you to take this, when did the Mahabharata war happen, and also the Bhishma Nirvana, because that's where this evidence comes. Frankly, I should also admit, now if you are outside India, then this is how these books would appear, the cover pages on Amazon. The point I'm saying is, I have some close to, I would say possibly, I'm using the word 300 plus for a long time. I would say it is now getting towards 400. Okay. Now, these are not always astronomy observations. These are sometimes chronological observations. Every time somebody objects to something, to respond to that, they will pull some words from Mahabharat. To respond to that, I have to pull 20 verses from the Mahabharat. And therefore, the relevant evidence in the discussion goes up. So I would say the Bhishma Nirvana and historic Rama now would have possibly close to 400. But let me admit that those 400 also does not include all the exhaustive evidence. Very recently, like a year or 2 years ago, one of a wonderful authors, Sai Swarupa Ayarji, she was doing another detailed study of Mahabharata, the 18 days war, and pulling every single statistics on it. It's a beautiful study. It is still in works, and in some form she will publish it one day. But I got some snippets from that. And when she was doing it, I asked her, as she goes through the 18 days, if she come across any astronomy evidence, because she was going verse by verse, to bring it to my attention. And kind of her, that she brought some good, I would say anywhere from 5 to 10 additional astronomy references to my attention, which I had missed. So I'm saying there are some additional references which are not even in these books. But get those books, it's to understand what it means by all the evidence and what actually Mahabharata researchers do against that claim. Okay, so quickly continuing with Professor Iyengar. Some of the things he has done is every Mahabharata researcher must do. And again, I would say 99% of the Mahabharata researchers simply do not do it. I mean, this is in praise of Professor Iyengar. Okay. Now, he consulted 5 different editions of Mahabharata text. Absolutely right thing to do. Okay. I consulted, I don't put a specific number, but I consulted more than 5. Because if it existed, and if I can access it, I have consulted it. In addition, I consulted many Sanskrit experts, okay, on going over these specific verses, specific astronomy references, any references, multiple Sanskrit experts. I go to multiple Sanskrit experts asking for their input, to a specific translation or multiple translations. Okay. I have gone to additional Sanskrit experts asking for other details like the tense, the grammatical understanding of each verses. And I'll tell you why this is important. Recently, on one public discussion group, Professor Aiyangar raised another issue. And I'm so glad and thankful that he raised that issue. This is nothing to do with Mahabharata directly. It is about Ramayana, so I'll not discuss that. But after doing this, we will take it into account because it has a relevance to Mahabharata also, because that same reference, the same word comes in the Mahabharata also. But let's move on. So what he did is a right thing to do. Professor Iyengar consulted 5 different editions of the Mahabharata text. That's the right thing to do. There are some variations. Okay, some verses may not be found in one, they may be found in another. And a researcher, a rigorous researcher, will take all of them into account. Now, when they contradict each other, they are conflicting with each other, it's perfectly okay for a researcher to say, all right, for my date, the verse, the shlok mentioned in this particular manuscript of Mahabharata text matches for my date. Here, this particular verse, a corresponding verse, doesn't even make sense. I don't even know the meaning of it, or it says certain thing and it does not agree for my date. This happens in research all the time, like every data point. When we draw a regression, y versus x in a data points, many of you will realize that many times the regression line may not even have a single data point on the regression line itself. We still consider that as a meaningful thing. Now, here we are talking of explaining specific evidence for a specific year. It's more rigorous than even a regression or even a mathematical model. So Professor Iyengar says he is looking at 3 specific aspects, or his method, let's say. So he's saying he's taking calendrical references from the Mahabharata, which is what? Possibly, I mean, I don't want to speak for him, but if you read his paper, and I will encourage everyone to read his paper multiple times. But he's referring to sometimes Tithi, lunar months, okay, these solstices, so the season, so calendrical references. Then Bhishma and Udyoga Parva. Now, I don't know why he focuses, but remember, we are doing Poorvapaksha. So his focus is only on the Bhishma and Udyog Parva. Now, to be fair to him, actually, he does go beyond, okay, this parva, which any Mahabharata researcher should, many don't do it. So, although he mentions Bhishma and Udyog Parva, he does go beyond that. And we will refer to those specific references. He very clearly defines his search interval. Adityaji, again, pay attention to this. So, it's good that he's admitting his search interval. He said he searched for the year of Mahabharata war, and along with his Mahabharata evidence, only during this interval, only within this interval, 3000 BCE through 501 BCE. What was his motivation for selecting this interval? So, for example, my date 5561 BCE is not even tested by him. Okay. And that is his choice, I understand. And actually, he gives a reason, whether right or wrong, but he gives a reason why he stopped at 3000 BCE. The reason he stopped at 500 BC is because he is going with the assumption of Buddha in 500 BC. And definitely Mahabharata war happened before Buddha. So, hey, we don't need to do after 500 BC. And I'll give you the reason why he stopped at 3000 BC. He's also claiming that he looked at all possible solar eclipses or eclipses in general, 50s at the time of Mahabharata war, 15 years before the war, which is when they started for a Vanvas, and 36 years after the war, which is the passing away of Krishna, the flooding and destruction of Dwarka. Okay, so that's his methodology. Now he says, refers to Kali Yuga reference, and then he states that the reference is not useful. Okay, I'm just stating this is a Poorvapaksha. So yes, he refers to Kali Yuga, and he says it's not useful. One thing, if he says it, of course, he gets into that standard argument of 3102 BC and why are you claiming 1478 BC? So his way of getting around it is saying it's not useful. Now, I agree with him for a different reason. For example, the paper that we presented at the Indic Academy Purana conference, it was on understanding Yuga, Yuganta, beginning of a Kali Yuga, and its connection with the Mahabharata evidence. So we'll not go into that again. We will do another episode, Adityaji, on that one. And Jivan Rao and me, Jivan Rao did a phenomenal job presenting very rich evidence from the Mahabharata text. Close to 100 specific observations from the Mahabharata text for Yuga, Yuganta, and beginning of a Kali Yuga. By the way, just so that our audience realizes, those close to 100 observations are not part of the 200, 300, or 400 observations or evidence that I am referring to. Guys, okay, don't lose this moment. Essentially, now we are getting close to 500 plus specific references, not only astronomy, chronology, Yuga, Yuganta, Kali Yuga, the beginning of a Kali Yuga, its connection with the Mahabharata, connections with the Mahabharata, war dates, activities before the Mahabharata war, activities after the Mahabharata war. It's a tremendously rich evidence that is coming out. Okay, these are guys fascinating times. Okay, be ready and do your own tapasya in the meantime. Okay, to study this. Now, his justification for the selection of interval for searching the Mahabharata date, lower limit due to assumption of Buddha, as I stated. Upper limit, he states that 3000 BC due to the limitation of the software he was using. So it's a fair point, but also, of course, I think he realizes that, he does state it, that he says it will be very interesting to go beyond 3000 BC and see what this Mahabharata evidence does. Okay. Well, I had not read this paper until I had done my research, but I'll tell you that's exactly what I did. And it is indeed interesting. It leads you to 5561 BC and no other year. So he says that an obvious limitation of the present work is the time. This is what I'm quoting at the bottom is directly cut paste from his paper that I showed you. An obvious limitation of the present work meaning his work in 2003, is the time period studied. 4 years prior to 3000 BC, it would be interesting to find whether the 3 eclipse sequence and other textual statements can still be satisfactorily explained. Okay, I would say forget the 3 eclipses. You can talk of many eclipse sequences. Yes, they can be satisfactorily explained for 5561 BC. but lot other evidence, and the evidence that Professor Aiyangar has not even considered, or no other Mahabharata researcher has considered. So not just to point out him alone, but even going further, some of the evidence that they have considered but have failed to match it for their day, it also matches for 5561. Aditya ji, so I did a lot of long monologue. Before I get into this, do you have any comments, any questions?
No, I don't have any questions, but it is very interesting. And since you said Jeevan Rai so many times, I have to make a public request now. We have to bring him on the show as soon as possible.
Yes, in fact, we both can come.
Yes, together.
Okay, and then of course you can go on with him also, but we
Yeah.
both can come. So because our work like really jives together.
Yes.
In what we are doing, definitely. And it is always my intention. It's just that there are some things, the time has to come, right? the right muhurta, you can
Correct.
say.
Correct.
Now here, because Professor Iyengar mentioned that he has considered all the evidence, of course he's referring to the planetary evidence. I want to show you how rich is the evidence. Now this one, guys, what I'm showing you is really referring to 200 to 300 observations. Okay, now as I said, we have possibly 400 and 500, so just let's stick to this 300. Now this is the picture, this is the evidence that I used back in 2011, and the evidence kept on getting more and more, and it all matches to 5561 BC. The point I'm showing it, not to tout the whole 5561 BC here, we are doing Poorvapaksh of 1478. Professor Aiyangar is claiming that he is taking all the evidence. In reality, what he has done is this, okay? And that you can see from his paper or even other papers, not just one paper. You can look at his entire work. So in the blue, we have the evidence, what I call effects due to the precession. That evidence allows us to decide the approximate area bound by upper and lower bound where we should search for the year of Mahabharat war. The evidence in the orange color or yellow color, orange color, on the right side, I call it effects due to the near earth phenomenon. This is like to decide the precise and accurate timing of the specific events of the Mahabharat war. So in that approximate region, now there may be like an area of like a 2000 years, the whole interval, 3000, 4000, 5000 years. How do you select a specific year, a specific month, a specific day? And is there a sufficient evidence to do that? That comes from this orange side, the other side. Now, this is the evidence. Now, let me tell you, out of this evidence, Professor Aiyangar, which one he is considering, okay? Or rather, which one is not considering. Look, out of this, so this blue thing tells us where to search, and the other orange evidence tells us what to search and how to precisely and accurately arrive at the specific day, month, and year. Out of this rich evidence of Mahabharata text, Professor Aiyangar do not take into account Arundhati Vasishtha observation. In fact, after we do Poorvapaksh of this particular claim, we will get to what he has done with that Arundhati Vasishtha observation. I mean, we can give him a credit that at least for doing something about it. But the kind of jugaad that he has done, we will discuss that as a separate episode. But he doesn't consider that. And definitely it doesn't help him, because if he talks Arundhati Vasishtha, it immediately will take somebody beyond 4500 BC, beyond 6500 BC. There is no way and that's why people, Aditya ji, are fighting tooth and nail against that Arundhati Vasishtha observation. Because that one observation instantaneously dismisses all their claims. Just one observation. That is the power of Arundhati Vasishtha. And therefore, expect all kinds of attacks, all kinds of vile attacks on Arundhati Vasishtha. And guess what? Arundhati Vasishtha, with every single attempt to falsify or critique or criticize that observation, is going to make the thing stronger. I don't know, because I told you today that I used to sell plastic in Canada and whatnot. There is one material. Have you heard of Lexan or polycarbonate? It's a transparent plastic, right? And many of the glass shields also, sometimes they will make it out of polycarbonate. And we see these very attractive bottles, plastic bottles to drink water that are transparent and look very high quality. Sometimes the storage containers, many times they are made out of polyethylene, but sometimes a very high quality water storage containers are made out of Lexan. I mean, the brand name that I sold for General Electric was Lexan polycarbonate. Why I'm bringing that up? This is something similar, the metaphor for Arundhati Vasishtha observation. What is interesting is the property of the polycarbonate, or Lexan is a brand name. So if you take a bar made out of polycarbonate, okay, and you start hitting against the wall, against the stone, and so on, well, it will get scratches, okay, it will bend. But with every bitting, it gets stronger and stronger. I don't know if you knew that.
I didn't know that.
As a salesperson, we used to do that as a demonstration. Just go start make two bars and start hitting like swords battle or something, and they get stronger and stronger. They don't break. Arundhati Vasishtha is proving like that. There are every single Mahabharata researcher who wants to talk against Arundhati Vasishtha, and rightfully so, because if they don't, then they have no standing. Okay, so that Arundhati Vasishtha, Iyengar at least discusses in a different fashion. We'll see all that fun in another episode. Bhishma Nirvana also, he says he doesn't even talk about it. None. And Bhishma Nirvana evidence is so rich, and it directly takes you to a very narrow interval of like 5,000 BC to 7,000 BC. If he would have taken that into account, he would have never gone for 1478, but he did not take into account the positions of the sun and all of that. He does not take into account, other than in the context of an eclipse that he does. And we'll see what happens. Even there, he has to go and move the whole thing from where it actually happens, as said in Mahabharat, to wherever he wants to claim. On the other side, the orange evidence, he doesn't look at the cometary evidence there, doesn't look at the chronological aspect, doesn't look at the calendrical constraints, doesn't look at the phases and positions of the moon, a very rich evidence through the 18 days of the war. What he looks at is the planetary motions, or at least he claims that he's looking at the planetary motions, all the planetary evidence, and lunar eclipses. Okay. Now let us see how much truth is there. I will not discuss this, but just to show you visually, we have done that in another episode. This is how rich the planetary evidence is. 35 plus, and still counting. If I add what Sai Swarupa Ayarji brought it to my attention, it will get close to 40, by the way, okay, depending on how you count. But just take for now 35 plus planetary evidence. Out of this, what is he considering? We will see depending on how much time we have. So I'm going to quickly mention planetary things, but before I do that, we are around 50 minutes, 47 minutes. How much time, Aditya ji, we can go, or tell me when we need to stop? And
we can continue.
Okay. All right. So quickly, let me take you through at least the planetary positions that he is discussing. Okay, let me see. Okay. All right. So he takes the planetary evidence and divides it into 7 buckets. At least let's go through that. So he's calling it planetary position, that PP1. So he's calling it planetary position set 1. Okay. And a number of you who cannot read Nagari, you can possibly read this. Okay. So at the top, this is from Mahabharata. He's pulling this from a Udyog Parva. Here, Udyog Parva 142.8. Prajapatyam hi nakshatram, and you can see some variations like Prajapatyam cha nakshatram, Prajapatyam hi nakshatram. Meaning is same, it doesn't change much. Prajapatyam hi nakshatram grahastikshno mahadyuti shanaishchara pidayati pidayan pranikodikam krutva changarako vakram jeshtaya madhusudana anuradha prarthayate maitram samshaya manniva nunam mahadbhayam krishna kuruna samupastitam visheshena hi varshneya Chitram pidayate graha. Okay, this is from Udyog Parva. What is briefly it saying? Saturn is near Rohini. It is not saying Saturn is near Rohini. Okay, let me make that point. Actually, it is saying Saturn is afflicting Rohini. It is giving a pida. Okay, in Sanskrit word pida, or Hindi people will also understand pida dena. It is afflicting. It is torturing Rohini. Now, it can torture by being next to Rohini, it can torture by many other means. Okay, like somebody, if you have a mirror in your hand and somebody is sitting far away and sun is shining, You don't have to be close to that person to torture that person. You can actually point your mirror in such a way that the sunlight comes directly into the mirror, and you turn the angle of a mirror and reflect it and torture somebody else, like, just unnecessarily annoy that person. I'm just using this analogy or a metaphor because it has a relevance when we actually eventually get into planetary evidence the way I want to explain it. But let's go on. Then he's saying Anuradha. Yeah. So now remember the reference. Mars is in retrograde, is approaching Anuradha and Jeshta. So Mars is going retrograde near Anuradha Jeshta. So that's what the reference says. I'm going to show you that for 1478 plus minus 1-2 years, you cannot show Mars going retrograde near Anuradha and Jeshta. Now, Krutva Changarako Vakram, that Vakram equal to retrograde is Professor Iyengar's translation. That is the same thing Manish Pandit does, Achar does, but everyone fails to show that retrograde motion near Jeshta Anuradha for their year, whether it is a 3067 BC or 1478 BC. I don't get this. I mean, it is your own translation. I'm not saying Vakram means retrograde. In fact, I have put a very revolutionary, testable theory for what Vakram means in the Mahabharata times, at least in the Mahabharata text. But we'll come to that. And then he says there is a planet near Chitra. Remember that also, because he cannot show any planet near Chitra. Okay, so this is the PP1, he calls it. I'm just quickly showing you. Now it may not be very easy to read also, something for year 1478, 1479. Why did I go 1479? To give a benefit of doubt to him, because nothing is happening in 1478. So I said, let me check 1 year before, 1 year after. There is that reference to Mars going retrograde. Pay attention, retrograde near Magha. And in the Bhishma Parva, there is a reference to Magha Swangarako Vakra Shravanaicha Brahaspati. That Magha went Mars went Vakra near Nakshatra Magha. Now, guys, please pay attention. This is something that is not covered by Professor Aiyangar, but to give the best benefit of doubt to his claim, to see if it can be proved right in every possible way. I am going out of way trying to look for a evidence around that year of his claim, 1478 BCE, plus minus 1 year, because there is nothing in 1478. So I went even 1 year before, 1 year after. And I found that if you go 1 year before, actually you can see the Mars going retrograde near Magha, the way I'm showing you here. So I said, okay, so he has not discussed, and I will show you what he has discussed. In fact, he says we have to go 14 years before to see the Mars retrograde. I'm saying if you would have tested 1 year before, he can show that, but he doesn't discuss it. I will tell you why he does not discuss it, because it gets him into more trouble. But I actually tried to show that Magha Swangarako Vakra can be shown in principle to be true for 1479. And if it can be shown for truth for 1479, I'm willing to accept that as a decent corroboration for 1478 claim. But he is not interested. Okay, something very interesting things happen in this Mahabharata research area. So I'm showing that Mars retrograde, actually, when I was testing his claim, I found it to be retrograde near Magha. Mahabharata does say that Magha Swangarako Vakra, Shravanaicha Brahaspati. Magha's Angarako, Angarak is the Mars, and Magha is a nakshatra, and Shravan is a nakshatra, and Brahaspati is a Jupiter. So I am trying to check if it can be validated for his date. So I did that, by the way. Now, Professor Aiyangar ignores Mars retrograde near Jeshta Anuradha. See, he has written in the translation. And why does he ignore in the discussion? Because he cannot show that to be the case for 1478. So now, guys, pay attention. There are two retrograde motions. I'm not saying retrograde, it is their translation. Vakra motions of of Mars near Magha, one nakshatra, and Mars near Jeshta Anuradha. Professor Aiyangar translates that here, but does not bother to show if it is true for 1478 BC. I'm saying it is not true for 1478 BC. For the Mars going retrograde near Magha, I tried to test for his date. Actually, it can be shown, but in a way, somehow he's not interested. Now you should wonder why. Why not? In addition, let me mention, there are 6 plus additional specific evidence of Mars in the Mahabharata text. And either he has not shown the awareness of it, or if he has shown awareness, I would encourage you to read his paper. We can show that it does not corroborate, does not match for 1478 BC. So 1478 BC is a disaster purely on the Mars evidence, which he's, by the way, claiming that this one perfectly matches for 1478. Okay. Now, what am I showing here? Yeah, 1478 here, the starting day of the war. He has not clearly stated what is the first day of the Mahabharat war. So I had to infer it. So I'll not go into that discussion today anyways. We'll get into when we do next session. Okay, now, very important. I'm going to show you this. Okay, that is the reason it is shown. Adityaji, how clearly do you see this picture here, the second picture? Do you see the full moon here?
Yes, I see the full moon.
Okay.
Yes.
Do you see this Saturn?
Yes, I can
Where
see
my arrow
that.
is. And then
Yes.
the Jupiter here. Okay.
Yes,
Good.
I can see that.
And then the Rohini here. Huh? This is
Right.
very important. So I put that picture for that reason also. 1478 is the year that he's claiming as the year of Mahabharat war. And he's saying this evidence that I'm showing you matches for his date. I said the Mars evidence, Mars does not go retrograde near Jeshta Anuradha as he's claiming for the year 1478. He's also not claiming that it does. In fact, he shows the translation, he does not discuss it. Mars does go retrograde a year before near Magha. I brought it to the attention of you guys, all you guys, but he's not discussing, don't know why. The next one, another powerful evidence that's why he's saying the planetary position PP1 is very solid for his date. What is that? Prajapatyam cha nakshatram grah tikshna mahadyuti shaneshchara pidayati pidayan panikodikam. The Saturn is torturing, afflicting Rohini is very solid. I wanted to show you here. In year 1478, look at the positions of Rohini. This is Rohini nakshatra here. That doesn't change a lot. This is Krittika. Okay, next to that is a Krittika. Then we have a Bharani. Then we have a Ashwini. These are the Yoga Taras, the prominent stars in that nakshatra space I am showing you. Then nakshatra Revati here. Okay, the Revati star 1, Revati star 2. And beyond that, if you go to the further west, is Uttara Bhadrapada. So Jupiter is near Uttara Bhadrapada. Saturn is between Ashwini and Bharani. You can visually see that. And Rohini is like a 2 or 1 nakshatra afterwards. So Saturn is near Bharani, Ashwini. Jupiter is near Uttara Bhadrapada. And I'm going to show you the next reference. This combination, Professor Aiyangar, in his own subjective mind, thinks as a very good corroboration of Saturn afflicting Rohini in 1478. Now, out of 27 nakshatras, somebody would say, well, hold on, that seems like a very close to Rohini. I agree. I have no problem with that. But what is the criteria? What is the objective criteria? What is the principle that Professor Aiyangar is using to claim that a Saturn in Ashwini and Bharani is torturing Rohini, or a Jupiter, it will come into his paper, and it is in his paper, that Jupiter also from Uttara Bhadrapada is torturing Rohini. What is the principle? The reason I'm guys asking is, actually, the planet can be next to Rohini and therefore it is torturing. We can always give a leeway of plus minus 1 nakshatra because it's a visual observation. So that's understandable. Also in astronomy or even astrology, like, the every house, like the opposite house is always afflicted in astrology. For a second, I'm going to astrology. Like, so from the first house, the 7th house is afflicted. From any house, all the planets always have a drushti, they call it, on the 7th house, which is the out of 12 house, it is the opposite house. I'm talking astrology for a second. Is he using an astrology sense of it? Also, in astrology, it is not just the 7th house that is afflicted. For example, I just happen to have my notes about the astrology there, So Saturn will affect from wherever it is. Again, guys, I'm talking astrology for a second. Don't confuse with astronomy. The Saturn will afflict 7th house, as I said, always. but it will also do third house and a 10th house. Jupiter, it will do seventh house. As I said, every planet will in astrology will do the opposite house, but it will also do fifth house and a ninth house. Mars will, of course, will do seventh, as I said, but also fourth and eighth. My point is he using some sense of astrology to say that this perfectly matches for 1478? He has not stated anything. But if you use this astrology chart that I just mentioned, then also it does not qualify. A Saturn from that position, even from astrology perspective, will not afflict or torture Rohini. And guys, I'm just using the astrology numbers. I do not claim any expertise in astrology whatsoever. I'm just pulling that information from my wife Ashwini, who is an astrologer. And Jupiter from Uttara Bhadrapada also will not affect this Rohini from the astrology perspective. So it's important that people know that. Quickly, I'll go through, just at least we will introduce these 7 and we will discuss it next time. The planetary positions 2 and 3. Okay, so 2, Rohinim Pidayannesho Stitho Raja Shaneschare, which is essentially same reference as before, occurring somewhere else, which is to say that this Saturn is afflicting Rohini again. And again, in the next chapter, he says, Shweto Grahas Tatha Chitram Samati Kramya Tishtati, a white planet resides having crossed Chitra. So Chitra reference also comes twice. Okay, some planet near Chitra. When we actually eventually sometime Adityaji we get into describing all this rich evidence of planets from Mahabharata 455-16 BC, you will see in all glory how beautifully it fits. But let's go with the Poorvapaksh. So no explanation for Graha near Chitra, understandable. So he mentions in the translation because it is there in the Mahabharata, but he has his no explanation as to which Graha Mahabharata is referring to, and certainly he cannot show one near Chitra for 1478. Therefore, he doesn't talk about it. No explanation for Graha near Chitra. Quickly, the planetary positions 4, because we did 2 and 3 on the previous page. This is extremely rich coming from the Bhishma Parva number 3, Adhyay number 3. Very rich. Maga Swangarako Vakra Shravane Brahaspati Bhagam Nakshatra Akramya Surya Putrena Pidate Shukra Proshtapade Purve. I'll just put a cursor here so you know what I'm reading. Shukra Proshtapade Purve Samaruya Vishampate Uttaretu Parikramya Sahita Pratyudikshite Shamo Grahas Prajvalita Sadhuma Saha Pavaka Indram Tejasvi Nakshatram Jeshtham Akramya Tishtati Dhruvam Prajvalito Goram Apasavya Pravartate Chitra Swatantare Chaiva Dishtita Parushograha Vakranu Vakram Krutvam Cha Shravane Pavaka Prabha Brahma Rashim Samavrutto Lohitango Vyavastitam. Okay, a lot of Sanskrit here. These are specific planetary names, specific nakshatra names. This Brahma Rashi is what that whole debate going on the Bharatiya Vidvat Parishad, and sometime we'll do episode or possibly couple episodes on that. Very interesting, very fascinating, and I'm so glad and thankful to Professor R.N. Iyengar ji for initiating that debate. Okay, so Brahma Rashi comes here. Aditya ji, that same Brahma Rashi shows up in the Ramayana. That same Brahma Rashi is also there in the other literature. For example, Brahmyam Nakshatra, it comes in the another version of Mahabharata. It is also there in the Parashara Tantra. It is referred by Vruddha Garga. Very, very important thing. I'll just quickly, going on the sideline, I'll mention what that is. It is the Nakshatra Abhijit, okay, that we consider sometimes we don't consider in the Nakshatra list of 27 or 28. If we say 28, we include Brahma Rashi or Abhijit. It is the same star Vega. Anyone knowing even a little bit of astronomy will know this star Vega, V-E-G-A, in the sky. It is part of the summer triangle. And you know what? It is used as a golden standard for defining the brightness of the stars in the sky. So Vega is given a number like a 1. You know, Vega is called like its magnitude is 1. And anything brighter than Vega would get a lower number. Like, so the sun is like a minus something, negative, you know, because, you know, you don't need to look at wonder where is the sun if it's in the sky. Same thing for moon and Venus and whatnot. But as you go towards the smaller and smaller, stars that are not easy to see, the number of magnitude number goes up from the 1. Very important star. So Mars is in retrograde in the Magha. We discussed that. Jupiter is in the Shravana. He doesn't discuss it. Saturn is afflicting Purva Falguni. That is that verse there. He does not discuss that. When I say he does not discuss, see, he is discussing it here, right? He is discussing it here, planetary positions 4. But what I'm saying is he cannot show this to be the case for his claimed year of 1478. So he is discussing it, but he should be explicit in saying, hey guys, okay, these are the Mahabharata observations. My apologies, or I'm sorry, they do not match for my 1478. What is interesting is that in spite of all this, at the end of it, he concludes, so 1478 looks to be a very impressive claim year for the year of Mahabharat war. I'm saying these, all that in a summary, 1478 BC cannot explain any of this. And what is the response of Professor Aiyangar? I'm saying, please read it from his original paper. The fact that such a rich evidence of the Mahabharata text does not match for 1478 BC does not bother him. Very nonchalantly, he still continues and says how 1478 BC is actually the year of Mahabharata war. Go figure. Okay, quickly, we'll do 2 more and we'll stop. Planetary positions 5. He calls it set 5. So here, quickly. Graham Tamra Runashiko Prajwalanta Vivastito Saptarshiram Udaranam Samavachadya Vaiprabham Samvatsara Sthainancha Graha Prajwalito Vibhav Vishakhayo Samipasto Brahaspati Shaneshcharo Krutikasu Grahastivra Nakshatre Prathame Jwalan Vapumshi Apaharanam Bhasa Dhumaketu Rivastitah Trishu Purveshu Sarveshu Nakshatreshu Vishampate Buddha Sampattate Abhikshnam Janayam whatever, okay. What is that, Aditiji? Mahad Chaturdashim Panchadashim Bhutapurvancha Shodashim Imatu Nabi Janami Amavasyam Trayodashim. See, I'm not very used to reading Sanskrit in this English format.
In Roman letters, yeah.
In Roman letters, yeah. Chandra Surya Ubhao Grasto Ekamase Trayodashim Aparvani Graha Veto Praja Sankshapa, forgive me, Sankshapa Yishataha. Okay. Quickly, I'll say, without going into the details, and he is admitting, by the way, okay. So, total of 7 positions, 7 sets he creates. PP1, PP2, PP3, PP4. So 4, I said he doesn't agree. He's not saying, so he discusses it and he thinks discussion is enough, as if. Okay, he's not claiming that the 4 matches. He's not claiming that these 5 matches. Okay, and then he gives some different explanation. We will cover that in the next session. But the fact is, the very fact none of this is matching for 1478 does not bother him. I mean, he says, okay, that's fine. I mean, none of this is matching 1478, but still 1478 is the year of Mahabharata war. Okay, anyways. Okay, quickly 2 more. Planetary position 6. I'll not read this. Quickly read the translation. When Karna got killed, this is 17th day of the war. River stopped flowing, sun set with pollution, the bright sun-colored planet, son of Yama. This is one variant reading here, Yamasya Putra. In another reading, you will find Somasya Putra. So once you understand Somaputra, you know exactly what that is. That is referring to Mercury. So these are the, so Aditya ji, like sometime you and me discuss and you say there are no variations, and I know what you mean by that. These kind of variations do occur, which is to say, see, everything else is same, but the Somasya Putra, somebody else wrote it as a Yamasya Putra. These are the errors made by what you can say, a script writer who may not be familiar with astronomy, or who may not be familiar. He's just simply doing a job, like, you know, the typist. The person is typing something from somewhere. He's not paying attention to what is being said there, or what he's typing or she's typing. They're simply just typing it. Something like that happens, and the errors can occur like this. This is a very good example. And again, I would thank Professor Aryan Iyengar for doing this kind of detailed research, which is to say, he will bring these variant readings from different sources and will discuss it in his papers. Okay. Again, he cannot show this to be how this is valid, because Yamasya Putra, who knows? There is no answer to what is a Yamaputra in astronomy. Somasya Putra, yes, Mercury, and he cannot show any of this for 1478. I have shown what that Mercury does, why it is described as Grahasya Tiryak, why it is said Mercury is going Tiryak, oblique, okay, in that time. When we get to our evidence of 5561, sometime we'll discuss that. Quickly, last one, and I'll stop. Let's see. Okay, yeah. So this one I am showing you for 1478. It may not be very clear, so I'll not discuss to people, discuss with why this doesn't match. So let me just skip that for now. But the evidence that he just discussed on the previous page, it is not matching, okay, for 1478. And I'm showing this for 5561, how it is matching, but I'll not go into that detail today, okay? So I'm showing you the picture of the 17th day of the war. Karna has fallen, and how the Jupiter is afflicting the Rohini, and how the Mercury is rising Tiryak. These are the description that beautifully match for 5561. They do not match for any other dates, including 1478, but we'll not go into the details today because we are already over time. Quickly, last one, and I'll stop. Again, he gives the last set of planetary positions. He calls it PP7. And he says three planets on the last day of the war. This comes from Shalya Parva. Bhrugu Suno Dhara Putro Shashi Jaina Samanvito Charamam Pandu Putranam Purastat Sarva Bhu Bhujam. Venus, Mars, along with Mercury, appeared behind the Pandavas, which is to say, appeared behind Pandavas, that is on the west side. Well, west or east doesn't matter. At some point, these will be on the east. Other times, they will get on the west. They are east of the sun, which means for visually to see them, we can only see them after the sunset. Okay. And so that's why also like in the west direction is perfectly fine. But Earth is round, they are going around it. So east or west doesn't matter. The fact is that they three are in close proximity, like a conjunction that matters. I'm glad that he quotes even this reference, which is not there in the critical edition. And people make a big fuss about critical edition. Again, this is a statement on the critical edition. Critical edition is, they have done a great job, but they have not done a perfect job. What is beautiful, the evidence that is not included by the critical edition, the astronomy evidence from in the context of Mahabharata, I have shown that even the evidence, astronomy evidence not included by critical edition, I have shown that how it is perfectly corroborated for 5561. This verse quoted by Professor Aiyangar is a good example of that. And I don't know if I have a picture. So 1478 here, this is the picture for his one. Again, you may not be able to see it, but here for 5561, the last day of the war, 2nd November, it's a Pushya Nakshatra, and I'm showing Mars, Venus, and Mercury. Okay, sun is here. So remember, Mercury is always close to the sun. So you get to see what the separation is still there. It is actually very, very close. It never gets more than 27 degrees or so, or even actually less. Jupiter is gone below horizon, sun is below horizon. And at the end of the day, after the sunset, anyone on the 5561 BC, the last day, people could have observed, any observer would have observed Mercury, Venus, and Mars together. Okay, just with a naked eye observation. That is this observation that, guys, we are seeing. Okay, we will stop. So quickly, last statement, Adityaji, my apologies if I went over time. The ecliptic, which had already been named from previous astronomer, even though the textual planetary position. So he discussed 7 sets of planetary positions. Look what he's saying about planetary positions 4, 5, 6, and 7. He says, even though the textual planetary positions 4, 5, 6, 7 that we just discussed cannot be taken on their face value, the other positions 1, 2, and 3 should be reliable since all editions agree on this. Blah, blah. This is not a correct claim. Now, remember what he's saying. He's saying 4, 5, 6, 7 cannot be taken on their face value. Guys, you must learn to read the lines and interpret them. He is saying they cannot be taken on a face value 4, 5, 6, 7 because he cannot match them for 1478 BCE. But the fun is not over. Positions 1, 2, 3, he's saying that should be considered reliable because all editions agree on this. First thing, that statement itself is not correct. But I have just shown, and we can go back again, that actually another time that the positions 1, 2, 3 that he's claiming match for 1478 do not match for 1478. That is what I discussed today. So quickly, I want to give a rebuttal to his claims here. First thing I'm saying, the above claim is false. Why it is false? Because the portions of 4, 5, 6, 7 that he's saying cannot be taken on the face value as if like all editions do not agree. That's what he's claiming. Not true. The descriptions in 4, 5, 6, 7 that he described are actually consistent through multiple editions of the Mahabharata text. So that claim is not correct. Now, for PP 1, 2, 3, he's saying they are reliable because all editions are agreed. Well, here is a news for all the readers of Mahabharata, all the researchers of Mahabharata, and also for Professor R.N. Iyengar, that the positions claimed 1, 2, 3, he's saying show variations through multiple editions of Mahabharata. Well, they actually show variation, just like 4, 5, 6, 7 show. So there is no reason to separate 1, 2, 3 and saying they are something special and more reliable. No, absolutely not true. Okay. And I said the PP 1, 2, 3 are actually what he's saying, therefore they are reliable and should be used, because in his mind, in the mind of Professor R.N. Aiyangar, he's thinking the descriptions of Planetary in 1, 2, 3 matches for 1478. I am saying they do not match for 1478. Okay, we will stop on this slide, Aditya ji. So let me see. I'll stop sharing. My apologies if I went over time.
No, what a wonderful, I think, Poorvapaksh. And one more thing I would like to clarify. Some people think that Bhakti means emotional, but this presentation was filled with Bhakti. It is, so scientific elements are included in Bhakti. And sometimes I always say, Bhakti is the most scientific process. A person who is, the person who is a Bhakt naturally going to do more research than the others. And so Gyan is secondary to Bhakti. If Nilesh, you did not have Bhakti, you would not have gone to some deep research.
Correct.
So some people reject Bhakti all the time. That, oh, it's for emotional people, sentimental people. But all the saints have been Bhakt. Vyasdev is a Bhakt. So Brahma is a Bhakt. So, just to reject Bhakti as emotional is unscientific, according to me, because you are...
I totally agree. And I'll give you the other side of it. It is always good to give. Now, just like some people in a very reductionist sense, they think they are jnani and therefore Bhakti is not for them.
Correct.
There is a other side to it. Like I run into them all the time. They said, ki, bhai, main to bhakt hu. Don't tell me this. I'm not going to do this. And Krishna is saying exactly opposite.
That's right.
Jnanam vishuddham vipulam yathayatad. He's saying to Uddhava, the greatest bhakta. Vairagya vijnana yutam puranam akhyahi vishveshwara vishvamurte tvad bhakti yogam cha mahad vimrugyam. There is a lot more that is worthy of investigation, and a bhakta does that. Jnanam vishuddham and vipul.
In the same conversation, he says, one who worships me with intelligence worships me actually. So Bhakti is evam buddhe param buddhva samsabhyatmana matmana. So
very good. So our nahi jnanena sadrusham pavitram iha vidyate from Bhagavad Gita, right?
Yes. So both sides are correct, because anything you reject, it's not Bhakti. Because Bhakti is a science. I would call it investigative research into Parabrahman.
Yeah, in fact, they are not two sides, right? It's like a jnana equal to karma equal to bhakti. So even the next one. So you cannot be just jnani. You cannot be in a bhakti and sit lazily. That is also not allowed.
That is also not allowed. Yudhyasya vigajora. So, yudhyasya vigajora doesn't mean that you always take out the sword and go out. Sometimes yuddha is also done with your brain also. This faculty is given to us, intelligent buddhi, for this only, this type of research only.
Correct. Otherwise, Krishna would have made us robots.
Exactly.
Program.
People talk about artificial intelligence. I always say common intelligence is more important than artificial intelligence. Yes. It's a human beings who invent AI. Okay, thank you so much, Nilesh ji. As usual, a pleasure. And all the viewers who watched it, some of you may not have understood it, but watched again, because some of them are very technical matters. And also, you are getting inspired to get into astronomy. So Vega star is something I picked up from this thing, where this discussion also, because the Vega star is the most prominent stars which determines the illumination of other stars, which you said. And also, so this is the time for getting into that aspect also, because this is also a science. So those of you who want to watch it again, it will be available on YouTube shortly, and do comment over there. Let us know. Namaskar.
Namaskar.